You're welcome back to the conversation in News Central Television. Moving now to Ghana, where protests erupted as citizens expressed their frustration over the soaring cost of living and the economic turmoil plaguing the nation. Demonstrators gathered outside the government's main building, where they were met with a heavy police presence. About 49 protesters were arrested by the police, claiming they had violated a court order prohibiting assembly. The protests have become more frequent in the past 2 years, reflecting growing discontent with the economic crisis that has gripped Ghana, despite its past reputation as an economic model in Africa. Now, joining me this evening from Accra in Ghana is Mawuli Dake, public affairs analyst. We also have Kpebu, legal practitioner. A warm welcome to you, gentlemen, and thanks for joining me on the conversation.
Thank you, and great to be part of the conversation.
Now, I'd like to start with you, Mawuli Dake. To better understand the economic crisis in Ghana, could you provide us with an overview of the specific economic factors that have led to the current situation? How did Ghana get to this point, and how have these factors affected the livelihoods of ordinary Ghanaians?
Yes, I would describe our situation as a self-inflicted crisis. A disaster of leadership. We have a government that came into power under Akufo-Addo with so much goodwill and with an economy that wasn't in the best of shape in the world, but was doing okay. And a combination of mediocre leadership, of greed, corruption, looting, and sheer arrogance in leadership that were not willing to listen to anyone. Many of us saw this coming and we sounded the alarms, but Martin is on the call. Martin has consistently been sounding the alarm, and they thought that they knew it all. Their slogan was that we have the men. So there are fundamental issues that are wrong with our economy that we can't lay on Akufo-Addo, but the immediate cost of this is mostly due to leadership failure on the part of Akufo-Addo and the corruption. And one of the immediate causes of the current protest was recently a minister, one of Akufo-Addo's closest friends, who is also a minister in his government, had her house help arrested for stealing millions of dollars from her house.
It was all over the news. Bedroom. Yeah.
Yes. To the extent that the lady was stealing money from her bedroom over a period, and she wasn't even aware. So imagine how much money was in the room that a house help, an 18-year-old house help, will have access to millions of cash. And the owner doesn't even know that it's missing until she was actually caught. And when her house was raided by the special prosecutor, they found even millions upon millions of cash in her bedroom. And she had the full support of the president. When she resigned, the president issued a statement saying that, oh, I know that the investigation will clear you of no wrongdoing. So obviously, I would say that this is a self-inflicted disaster that we are witnessing in Ghana.
Bad optics there on the part of President Nana Akufo-Addo. I'd like to bring in Kpebu into the conversation. Now, Martin, the arrest of both protesters and journalists have raised concerns about civil liberties and freedom of the press in Ghana. As a legal practitioner, can you elaborate on the historical context of these issues and the potential long-term impact on Ghana's democratic institutions and credentials?
Okay, great. Yeah, so when the Fourth Republic was ushered in 1993, what happened was that there was this law that required the public to seek permission from the police in order to embark on a demonstration or to assemble like this one. So citizens saw that that law was bad, and it's even the party currently in government, the MPP, that took that matter to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court struck down that law, meaning that when you want to demonstrate, you just have to notify the police. But if there are security concerns, the police could ask you to make changes to the date of the demonstration or the venue. Fast forward, if you cannot agree with the police, then the police could go to court. Then a judge will decide between the parties. So in this particular case, the police are saying once they couldn't agree with the organizers or the demonstrators, they filed a case in court. Now, if you file a case in court, ordinarily you wait for the court to determine it. So the police were acting unlawfully when they turned around and arrested the demonstrators. Yes, the law doesn't give them the right to arrest demonstrators because they've not committed any offense. If they think they've come there on a day they are not supposed to, you file contempt charges against them. But the law definitely doesn't give the police the opportunity to arrest. And 49 of our demonstrators were arrested. It was terribly bad, terrible. Yesterday is Black Thursday in Ghana because the arrests and the beatings of these protesters, including lawyers and journalists, certainly sent our democracy back a few notches. It was terrible. That's the context. I mean, citizens are very disquiet, citizens are very displeased, citizens are dissatisfied with the economic hardship, the poor manner in which President Akufo-Addo is handled the economy. And so they just sought to vent their anger, and yet they got arrested. That is not how a democracy works.
Indeed, Martin, that's not how democracy works. Now back to you, Mawuli Dake. President Nana Akufo-Addo's government has pointed to external factors like the pandemic and the Ukraine crisis as contributors to Ghana's economic challenges. To what extent do these global events impact Ghana's economy compared to domestic policies and management? Or is the Ukraine war and COVID-19 convenient excuse for the Nana Akufo-Addo administration?
Yes, so there is a reason why they are labeled as global crisis. There is a reason why it is global in nature, because these are crises that are affecting the whole world. And both Nana Akufo-Addo and his vice president, Dr. Aborowa, have given speeches in Ghana when they were opposition leaders, responding to this question of governments using global crisis as an excuse for their failure. And they brilliantly said, Ghana is not the only country in the world. And there are countries that are actually in the middle of these crises that we are talking about, whether it's Russia, Ukraine, or COVID. And so Ghana cannot claim to be more affected than the countries that are in the center of it. Yes, of course, we all acknowledge that these global trends affect all countries. And definitely it has a part to play in Ghana's current situation. But it is not the primary cause of our current crisis. Our current crisis is due to political leadership failure, pure and simple, no excuses.
Now, back to you, Martin. President Nana Akufo-Addo's transition from a human rights lawyer to a leader presiding over a crackdown on protests is quite intriguing. Can you provide analysis of the factors or the dynamics that might have influenced this shift in approach? And also, we've witnessed the frequency of protests over the past 2 years, and it suggests a growing dissatisfaction among the populace in Ghana. What do you think are the key grievances driving this protest, and what has been the government's response to them?
Yeah, so top on the list is poor governance. Protesters are protesting because they've been given the short end of the stick. You know, Nana Akufo-Addo, when he was in opposition, was talking big, you know, like they say, talk is cheap.
Talk is cheap, yeah.
So at the time, he was giving too many slogans. He made number of promises. He promised milk and honey. But having come into office, he's not been able to deliver on the milk and honey. So naturally, citizens will be dissatisfied. And that's how come citizens sought to protest, okay, pursuant to their constitutional rights. Article 21 of Ghana's constitution guarantees the right to protest. So naturally, once citizens feel harmed by, they would want to protest, because Ghana, we have a very rich history of protest. Yes, we will protest and protest because we want better outcomes. So that's been it. It's the economic mismanagement. Look, we have at least 10% of our citizens who live on less than $2 a day. The World Bank benchmark for poverty is those who live below $1.90. Now, in Ghana, we have about 3 million citizens who live below $1.90. You say, so this is a natural reservoir for anger. Yes, a hungry man is an angry man. Yeah, a hungry man is an angry man. So that's a natural reservoir for anger. And these have not been helped by the poor and incompetent manner in which Nana Akufo-Addo has managed the economy. And so what we would ask him to do is to resign. As you mentioned that in Ghana's constitution, Article 60, Clause 13, there is provision for early elections. Yes, we have provision for early elections. This is how it happens. If the president and the vice president resign, then the constitution says the Speaker of Parliament should take over for only 3 months. Yes, you heard me right, just 3 months.
And conduct elections.
In that 3 months, yes, excellent.
Okay.
So that's what we are praying for.
Thank you, Martin. But it doesn't look like it's going to happen. That's a far-fetched dream that some Ghanaians might be having. But back to you, Mawuli Dake, with talking about elections, with elections on the horizon, a deeper look into the potential political implications of this protest would be valuable. How might these demonstrations influence voters' sentiment as Ghanaians go to the polls, and the party dynamics and electoral outcomes? Or is there still hope for the ruling party to turn things around before Ghanaians go for the general elections?
Well, the situation we are in is not something that we can get out of overnight. So as much as we all hope that we can get out of this as quickly as possible, it's not going to happen. The writing is on the wall. But because you asked about the elections, I don't think it's going to solve any of the issues that we are talking about, because we've been doing back and forth between the two parties. Obviously, everything points to the fact that, okay, it can't get worse than this. But with the situation we are in doesn't require little changes.
Now, but what's the government saying? What's the government saying beyond the excuses of COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine? Do they have a plan to fix the economy?
Their arrogance, yes, their arrogance won't even allow them to admit their role in all of this. So they'll blame the previous government, they'll blame the former president, they'll blame Ukraine. And those who try to point to them that they are the cause of the challenge, they are the ones that they target. And because you asked about the election, I wanted to say this. The writing is on the wall, they have no chance, but I don't think the 2024 election is going to be about people voting for them or not voting for them, because we've had a series of by-elections over the period. And we have what I call a total state capture in Ghana, where the government, knowing its predicament, has managed to capture key state institutions, like the Electoral Commission, where he successfully installed even partisan foot soldiers as commissioners at the Electoral Commission. So I think that they have a plan to make sure that he says his biggest ambition is to break the 8, to have his power win a third term. So I think that they are preparing to do whatever it will take, and I don't think it's going to be because people voted for them, because that one we know they will not get it. But I think that it's going to be a struggle for the opposition and Ghanaians to ensure a free and fair election, considering the partisanship that Nana Akufo-Addo has installed at the Electoral Commission, the police, and even the Supreme Court.
I mean, Ghana leaves so much to be desired as a country that used to be looked at as a model for democratic practice on the African continent. We'll keep monitoring the situation there. Thank you very much, Mawuli Dake, Public Affairs Analyst, and also Kpebu, a legal practitioner. Thank you both for your insights and your contribution to this subject. Do appreciate.
Thank you. Thank you.
And this is where we drop the anchor on today's edition of the conversation. In the first half, we did look at the removal of fuel subsidies, the report that fuel subsidies back in Nigeria. We just concluded a conversation in Ghana where the government has cracked down on cost of living protesters in the country. Thank you very much for being a part of the program. See you next time. I am Gbenga Aborowa. Bye-bye.